Let's talk about gender. A short practice in queer pedagogies is guided by the teachings of Judith Butler, starting with who is Judith Butler? Well, Judith Butler is a scholar in gender studies and in philosophy. Judith is from Ohio and is of Jewish descent, and Judith has a PhD in Yale and worked as a professor at the University of Berkeley in California. Why are they important to this discussion? Well, Judith Butler could be considered a pillar of queer pedagogies, or an alternative method of learning, thinking, and teaching that, in summary, seeks to answer the question, what is normal? Judith also has a handful of books dedicated to understanding gender, such as Gender Trouble, Who's Afraid of Gender, and Undoing Gender. Now, in practicing queer pedagogies and looking at the works of Judith Butler, let's have a conversation on gender. Judith is quoted stating, quote, "We act as though being of a man or being of a woman is something that is true about us, a fact about us. Actually, it's a phenomenon that's being produced all the time and reproduced all the time. To say that gender is performative is to say that no one is really a gender from the start," end quote. That's something I found difficult to agree with or disagree with outright for a very long time. I mean, we do not have data of a world without the social implications of gender. People as I know them either choose to comply or not to comply. We as people are not divorced from the observation of others and the influence of our direct peers as a society. I believe that if we were completely ignorant to the concept of gender, then perhaps we wouldn't feel it because we wouldn't understand it to feel it. The closest thing I can imagine is being a child. Without a strong internal understanding of what gender was or the standards that I would have to uphold to be seen as female, I did many traditionally masculine things. And to say that I was performing a gender or performing the role of male and refusing to wear a shirt or going fishing with my grandfather is reductive. I was doing things I knew to enjoy the sensation of. I wasn't seeking to fulfill a role. So I would agree that I was not inherently a gender from the start. But moving into adulthood and living in the reality of a gendered society, I didn't think that I could still agree for a while. Because now, from the start, or from the base, I'm a woman. Internally, I felt like a woman. I chose actions that were associated with men, but I was still a woman. I still chose to present as a woman. But to clarify even more, I chose to present as a woman because I enjoyed the external validation of woman, but I chose to identify as a woman because I enjoyed the internal sensations of being a woman. And the external factors, some of these choices are not enjoyable when it comes with identifying as a woman. I do not find the sensation of waxing my face or purchasing makeup enjoyable. I don't personally see the presence of facial hair to be inherently masculine because it's something that naturally occurs in both genders. Yeah, I know it's naturally occurring in both genders because if I didn't wax, I'd have a mustache. So I understand that facial hair is socially associated with men, but it's not biologically associated with men. I choose to wax as a way of confirming my identity, not to myself, but to those who look upon my face and my body. I, for a long time, felt like a woman, but I only wanted to be seen as a woman for the privileges offered when doing so, not because I needed to be internally assured of my own gender as I understood it. I understand femininity externally as painful and a monetary deficit and work to maintain, and it's something that takes a continuous toll on my mental health to uphold these standards at all times. And internally, I understood femininity as a collection of emotions and sensations. I don't need to perform to internally feel, but I do need to perform to externally receive validation for what I internally knew to be true. And defining internally is a collection of emotions and sensations. That's not a great definition. I mean, it certainly isn't one when I compare it to my definition of external factors. And when trying to define internal gender, I think I've proven to myself that it doesn't exist. Defining gender internally is how I've come to understand Judith Butler's teachings. When I think about the internal feelings, I think first about anatomy. I feel the weight of my breasts when I move, and I think that's female. But men grow breasts. The most common gender affirmation surgery is men seeking mastectomies as a result of gynecomastia, men being assigned male at birth, traditionally male men. And then I think about the pain of ovulation. But trans men who decide to be male feel the pain of ovulation. And intersex individuals who don't choose to have both biological sexes presented in their body feel the pain of ovulation while having a penis. So that's not inherently female. And then think about sensuality, the senses of being touched by a partner and touching a partner in a sexual sense. But so much of sexuality is based in misogynistic and religious and gendered standards that to say it's divorced from the external validations of gender is wrong. I then think of femininity as emotions and caring about things and nurturing, but that's something that was conditioned into me and out of men as standards of behavior, and they can't be divorced from the external validations of gender. And just perhaps everything I've once considered to be an internal understanding of my identity as a woman has also been external. And then all I'm left with is what I choose to do to avoid violence and disparity that comes with not conforming, with not successfully performing the gender assigned to me. So when Judith Butler says that it's a phenomenon, that no one really is a gender from the start, when I wonder why I still choose to be a gender conforming, and I think about all of the reasons I enjoy it, all of the reasons I enjoy it being external factors, perhaps then we can understand how we're not a gender from the start, And the removal of those forced binaries might allow for a more accepting world, one that will progress the conversation instead of conservatively block it. In understanding my choice to be gender confirming, perhaps you could understand why someone might choose to be gender non-conforming, or perhaps one's decision to be non-binary. Because some, unlike myself, don't find any enjoyment in being male or female, may not enjoy the sensations or actions performed by both parties, or the accompanying somatic experiences. I pay the price of not being true to my internal beliefs, like knowing that a mustache can be a feminine trait, for the privilege and benefit of fitting into society. Others can see that cost as losing themselves, and the self is too high a price to pay when the benefit is the praise of communities that don't accept them as they are. Now, I've told you that I am assigned a female at birth, and I make a conscious choice to continually present as a woman and identify with femininity. And if I were to grow out my facial hair, and I were to stop wearing makeup and dress primarily for comfort, and if I were to, cut my hair really short and grow out the hair in my underarms and my legs, I would still choose to identify as a woman. But society would not see me as a woman, nor would they associate me with what they understand as femininity. And that can lead in discussions about feminism. Back to another queer pedagogy as understood through Judith Butler, Judith states that we should always think critically about the category of woman and who should be included in the category of woman. And when I, a woman, stop the upkeep that has me being seen as a woman, I'm still a woman. And would understanding me as a woman in a hypothetically, traditionally masculine state help someone understand why trans women would be included in the category of women? Or what about trans women who are pre-transition? Or trans women who are post-transition but not feminine passing? What about trans women who decide not to transition at all? Or trans men? Maybe the main argument is that you can only identify with the gender that you're born into. As a cis woman, I can't help in finding anecdotes from my personal life, but perhaps I can point you in the direction of somebody assigned female at birth, but identified as male at a very young age, Alexander Avila. If you're a fan of video essays and you're interested in the topics of gender and feminism, you might be interested in some of their videos titled "Did Feminism Fail Men?" or "How Conservatives Created and Canceled Gender." Now, when discussing complicated social ideals that are deeply polarizing in recent history, it's important to not only understand, but be able to define terms like feminism, gender, and woman. Gender and feminism are unique in that the definitions behind them are endlessly complex and they leave much to be open, making it no less polarizing, but much more complicated to discuss. You can say it's easy to define, but the over of Judith Butler would disagree. You can say feminism is for women, and Judith Butler would say, what is a woman? In response, you could point to me. But I would tell you everything that you see at a glance is a performance, that you're seeing a reflection of what I'm told a woman should be and not what I am. So how would you define gender? Knowing that a woman is more than what is outwardly performed, how would you define a woman? Would you include trans people in the feminist movement? And if you disagree or agree with any points that I've made, I'd love to hear why. I would encourage you to look into the discussions and discoveries made by Judith Butler when discussing gender in the future. We have to understand what it is we are arguing in order to come to informed conclusions. Judith Butler seeks to understand and answer the questions that will lead us on our journey that ultimately will progress the LGBTQ movement and other communities as well. Thank you for listening to my short discussion on gender and queer pedagogies and the teachings of Judith Butler and why Judith Butler is important to these conversations.